Welcome to Anchored in History with the Puget Sound Navy Museum. Today we're exploring the former Middle Point Military Reservation, now known as Manchester State Park. Located in Port Orchard, Washington, this was once part of the harbor defenses of Puget Sound, guarding Rich Passage and the entrance of the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Today we'll be visiting three historic sites within the park: the Torpedo Storehouse, the Torpedo Casemate, and Battery Mitchell. As you explore on your own, please watch your step. If you have any questions, please send them to me in the comment box below the video. All right, let's go.
First, I want to take a step back to talk about the early history of this area. The first European to visit was British Captain George Vancouver in 1792. Then in 1841, the Wilkes expedition came through, naming tons of local sites like Bainbridge Island, Rich Passage, Sinclair Inlet, Orchard Point, and Middle Point, where we are today. The Puget Sound Naval Station was established in Bremerton in 1891. Now there was an important military facility to protect. In 1896, the year the Navy Yard's first dry dock opened, Army engineers returned to Bremerton to plan methods of defending against attacks by water. The site where we are today sits just across Rich Passage from the shipyard, making it a key defensive position. Defending Puget Sound was seen as a very important strategic goal at the turn of the 20th century. For about a decade, select sites around the Sound were being developed by the Coast Artillery to defend the region. 3 forts were built at the entrance to Puget Sound, with huge guns creating a triangle of fire to stop any invasions by sea. Fort Worden, Fort Casey, and Fort Flagler were designed to protect the area as a whole. Meanwhile, 2 additional fortifications, known as Fort Ward and Middle Point, were located at the entrance to Rich Passage, specifically to protect the waters leading to the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Although the other posts in the system served as designed through World War II, the site we're at today was only active for a few years. All of these former forts are now owned by the state of Washington and have become state parks. And of course, Middle Point, where we are today, is now Manchester State Park. Middle Point's main purpose was to serve as the fire control center for remotely fired mines in the event of an invasion. The land was purchased in 1899 and construction began soon after. The first site on today's tour is this big brick building known as the Torpedo Storehouse. Now, who's confused by the word torpedo in this building's name? Well, back in 1901, when this building was built, the word torpedo meant something different than it does today. It meant what we describe as a mine. They weren't propelled in any way, so not like a torpedo that you might fire at something. This building was designed for the storage of mines and the equipment used to detonate them. Mines like these were an important part of the harbor defenses built shortly after the turn of the century. The mines themselves were usually a steel ball, several feet in diameter, holding a fuse, a charge of explosive, and a lot of air to make it all float. An anchor holds it at a certain depth, so it's beneath the surface and cannot be seen from above the water, but will be hit by any ships coming through. Rich Passage is mostly about 60 feet deep here, which happens to be an ideal depth for mines. And the current here is much less swift than the waters at the entrance of Puget Sound, making this a good place to install a minefield. The building's use for mine storage was short-lived, but it went on to serve many other purposes. In the mid-1930s, the Navy converted it into a recreation building. In the years before and during World War II, enlisted sailors could come here to relax. You can see a fireplace inside that was installed for them. Our next stop on today's tour is the Torpedo Casemate. This concrete structure housed the firing equipment for the mines. Notice that it's set into the hillside, and the doors and windows you see here were once protected with iron doors and shutters. All of these features were designed to make it blast-proof. This shelter had its own electrical power system and bunk room. It had a big table with a chart of the passage with all the mine locations marked. It contained a control panel with individual switches for each of the more than 100 mines deployed in the passage, so that the mines could be set off manually. The building was completed in 1904. It is not believed that any mines were ever detonated here except for practice. Battery Mitchell, the final stop on our tour, was meant to protect this minefield. As originally designed, there would be heavy guns and a battery of 12-inch mortars positioned here, ready to fire at ships approaching rich passage from Puget Sound. As you can see, quite a bit of construction work was completed. However, this battery never actually had any guns at all. Battery Mitchell never fired upon enemy vessels, and it never even had the chance. Though Battery Mitchell never had guns, there's still plenty to see here. You can see the metal remnants of gun mounts near the top. There are stairs leading to 2 ammunition magazines. That's where bullets for the guns would be stored. Even lower, there are 2 rooms called bomb proofs. If they were being attacked, men under fire could take cover here. The site was named after First Lieutenant Robert B. Mitchell of the U.S. Army Artillery Corps, who died in 1904. His name was chosen for this site just 6 months later. As you can see, all the fortifications at Middle Point have long since been abandoned. Even just a few years after it was established, resources already tended to flow to the larger Fort Ward nearby on Bainbridge Island. This site was hard to maintain. It was a huge logistical challenge getting materials from the main fort on Bainbridge Island. There was no dock, and the roads weren't great. Adding to their problems was a lack of infrastructure here. There were no permanent living quarters. Nothing was connected to a water supply or sewer system. It's possible there weren't even any toilets. No one wanted to be stationed here, surrounded by forests. Meanwhile, if you were lucky enough to get stationed over at Fort Ward, it was a short drive to dance halls, bars, and restaurants. By 1908, it's generally agreed that there's no need for the site, especially without its guns. By 1910, all the mine facilities are duplicated over at Fort Ward, so the Middle Point property was finally abandoned. It does get used again briefly during World War I for torpedo testing, and then in the 1920s, it's used by the Puget Sound Navy Yard as a coal storage warehouse. The Army officially transferred Fort Ward and Middle Point to the Navy in 1938. But Middle Point's gun battery lay dormant even during World War II, while the rest of the region's military facilities buzzed with activity. After the war, the site of Battery Mitchell and the minefield were essentially abandoned. The site where we're standing was declared surplus in 1963, bought by the state of Washington in 1970, and officially opened as Manchester State Park in 1981.
Today, Manchester State Park is home to all that remains of the original Battery Mitchell and the Middle Point minefield, the gun batteries, the mining casement, and the torpedo warehouse. Thanks for visiting these sites with me here today. If you're interested in other harbor defenses, later this summer we're exploring the Triangle of Fire. But first, join us on August 1st as we head over to Seattle to explore Magnuson Park, which was a naval air station for many years.